My name is William Bauer. I'm a high school OpenSciEd teacher and curriculum writer. Let's learn about the last lesson of the cancer unit. I love this lesson because it empowers students to apply what they have learned about cancer to improve the health outcomes of their community. How did we get here? Lesson 11 was all about cancer treatment and its side effects. In that lesson, we learned that other factors, such as costs and access to healthcare professionals, might determine what options a cancer patient selects. In Lesson 12, we learned more about the causes of health outcome inequalities and what we can do about it. In this lesson, we answer the question, what can we do to support people in our community who have cancer? Here's the lesson at a glance. There is minimal prep in this lesson. As always, I recommend watching the Lauren and Lakita videos before showing them to your class. You will need to print an article about social determinants of health and cut each section into strips for your students. There are three main chunks in this last lesson of the unit. Let's go into each in more detail. In this first section, you will look at national data sets about cancer, diagnosis, and outcomes. We figure out that where we live impacts who is likely to get and die of cancer. These disparities in health outcomes cannot be explained by what we've learned about genetics so far in the unit. In Section 2, we are introduced to the concept of social determinants of health, such as education level, income, housing, access to healthcare, etc. Some of these social determinants of health were discussed earlier in Lesson 11 when we learned about the pros and cons of different cancer treatments. From this activity, we figure out that social determinants of health impact health and wellness. Distance from cancer specialists and changes in health insurance impact health outcomes in our community. In Section 3, we focus on what we can do to improve these social determinants of health. Students learn about the role of a healthcare navigator and develop questions that they can use to support a friend or family member who has a disease with a genetic component to it. This assessment gives students a real-life application for what they have learned about cancer and genetics in this unit. We figure out that even as students, there are ways that we can address health inequalities in our community by acting as healthcare navigators. My students left this unit feeling empowered about the role that they can have in improving their own health and their community's overall health. Here are some key moments. In Part 3, students research whether where you live impacts your likelihood of being diagnosed with cancer or surviving cancer. Is your genetic code as important as your zip code where you live? These are large data sets taken in an entire state, but there are still significant differences in the data in terms of how common cancer is and how likely one survives. In Part 4, our discussion really helps us transition to talk about health equity and social determinants of health. As you facilitate this discussion, listen for ideas students have about unequal outcomes of cancer survival rates and push them to consider that some of these causes might not be based in genetics, inheritance, or the environment. In Part 8, we learn about the causes of some of the inequity in health outcomes. Some of the social determinants of health are listed here. This image came from my county's public health department. I encourage you to look into what resources your local county public health department has. In Part 15, students develop an interview protocol as if they were accompanying a friend or family member to a doctor's visit and their friend has a disease with a genetic component to it. Your students may be already playing this role with their family or will shortly in the future. I had a student who completed this assignment on a Friday, and by Monday, I saw that they had emailed me and saying that they had used some of the questions with a friend who had learned that their uncle had been diagnosed with stomach cancer. This is the last lesson of the cancer unit, but students will still need to remember what they've learned about genetics and apply it to explain the mechanism behind natural selection in response to urbanization, which is the focus of the next unit. Here are a few material management tips and tricks. This lesson provides an opportunity for students to learn about health outcome disparities and social determinants of health in their own community. I learned some things about my community as well. For example, there are some groups in my community that have a life expectancy of 88 years old and others that only have a life expectancy of 53 years old. Emphasize with students that they can use what they've learned about cancer in this unit to live healthier lives and act as healthcare navigators for their friends and family. In terms of vocabulary, we encountered the concepts of social determinants of health and health equity in this lesson. To navigate into this lesson, we refer back to our driving question board and class consensus model. Students may also use the class consensus model to help develop questions to ask their friend or doctor as part of their interview protocol assignment. In this lesson, you can also create a public record when you define health equity as a class. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you take the time to teach this unit. It gives students a lot of great skills that they can use later in life that will make them and their families healthier.